Okay, so my name is Tong Moua, and I am a junior double majoring in global international studies and East Asian languages and cultures. Um, and I've decided to do my presentation on the imitation game by Jung. And then, okay, so here we have a picture of Dr. Jung, and she is currently a curator at the Museum of Oriental Ceramics in Osaka, Japan. She got her MA and PhD in the university in Kaito. Her research focuses on modern and contemporary Korean and Japanese ceramics. And that is Dr. Jung. And so her article can be summed up into one main statement, which is if porcelain cannot be produced, our country will break into pieces just like a smashed porcelainware. So next, I want to talk about the author's methodology. So Dr. Jung uses a lot of worldview opinions to construct like an encouragement about Koryo Celadon. So, for example, she talked about the French people and what their views were, and they stated that if Koryo porcelain was able to be reproduced again, then the Korean civilization would be able to recover and be advanced. And then they also talked about the reproduction of Koryo and how it would open new chapters of Korean civilization. So before we move on, we're going to talk a little bit about the terminology. I know some of these looks very familiar. The reason why they're on the list is because in my article it was all over the place in the article. So I just wanted to clear it up. So Koryo is a Korean dynasty that lasted from 1918 to 1392. And is listed as a keyword because the article talks about Koryo Celadon, and so as Celadon. So the Webster Merriam Dictionary defines Celadon as ceramic glaze originated in China that is greenish in color, otherwise known as jade green. And then a kiln here is a insulated chamber that is chemically change objects made from clay to pottery. And then the last two, so during the annexation of Korea by the Japanese established new institutions to modernize Korea, and the National Industrial Training Center, otherwise known as NITC, and the Central Laboratory of the Government General of Korea, CLGK, was some of these institutions that the Japanese people established. And then moving on, we're going to talk a little bit more about the author's argument and evidence. So here we have a picture of an American missionary named Horace Newton Allen. And he is crucial because he was the first one to record Koryo Celadon imitations. He was also a Koryo Celadon collector and he noticed that Japanese ware was similar to Koryo ware, and this must have to do with the annexation of Korea by the Japanese, and how we talked about, I believe there was a lecture that we talked about that Japanese people captured the Korean artists and kind of duplicated their work and incorporating that into Japanese wares. And that may be the reason why there were similarities between the Japanese wares and the Koryo wares. And then he started noticing these Koryo Celadon imitation pieces after the Gapson coup in October 1884. And so according to Dr. Jung, these imitations were not like intentional, and the reason why, they were made using traditional techniques and made from historical ways. So they were known as imitations or like considered as Koryo Celadon. However, the level of craftsmanship seems to be duplicates. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the Korea annexation in 1910. let me move this so you guys can see. So in the beginning of Korea's annexation by Japan in 1910, the reproductions of Koryo Celadon seems to be greater in number. And the Japanese people established policies to modernize Korea more and more and establish more institutions. Okay. And we already talked about the National Industrial Training Center, the NITC. NITC succeeded in producing Koryo Celadon. They were the first. Okay, so more institution creating Koryo Celadon was the Yuanjik Art Workshop. And in 1915, they succeeded in the art of reproducing Koryo Celadon as well. And they sold art under the name B1, which translates to Secret Garden. And because the products was very good in quality, they were often presented to the court. So that just shows how the quality of these pieces were not just simply to imitate that and to duplicate the looks using the same techniques, but they were well in quality. And it was able to be presented to the court. And that's an important factor. So this workshop produces bowls, jars, and ewers. And then important, I don't know if it's important, however, they did change the name to Joseon Art Workshop Company. And I just think that was a little, not weird, but it was just different because they were producing Koryo Celadon. So later they changed their name to Chosun Art Workshop. Maybe they, I don't know, they stopped creating Koryo Celadon or they just focus more on Joseon art, or I'm not sure how that would be. But moving on to critiques. So throughout the article, I see how Dr. Jung used worldview to stress or emphasize the Koryo Celadons and the importance of it. And I do solely agree that using worldviews on how they view Koryo Celadon and the importance of it is very useful. However, I didn't see much of how she used like the Koreans' viewpoints of their own Celadon. So I think that she could, if she were to mention that, I feel like her article would have been stronger. And another thing, Dr. Jung recognizes these imitations as Koryo Celadon when they're imitations. However, these imitations are just incorporating historical techniques and just inspired and by using the historical techniques to recreate these looks, these pieces. I feel that it should not be recognized as Koryo Celadon pieces. Now, I feel like they should be using another term because Koryo Celadon, I feel like it's more authentic, more during that period, that time. And I wouldn't recognize these as Korean Celadon wares because even though the techniques are the same, I feel that some placement during that whole process may be altered. Maybe the resource is altered, things like that. It might have been altered. So I would not recognize these as Korean Celadon more so than just imitations. And so this is the bibliography, the article by Dr. Jung, The Imitation Game. All right. And with that being said, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and good luck on finals.